Alright, so in this video we're going to be going over altruism, and we're going to be defining it, and we're also going to be talking a little about the Kitty Genovese case. If you're in Intro to Psych, this is maybe something you've touched on before. If not, this is going to be like a little introduction into this whole thing, and also a little overview of social psychology. Alright, so when we talk about altruism, we kind of have to define social psychology first, because that's kind of the branch that it falls under. So social psychology is the branch of psychology that studies how interacting with one another affects us. So when we interact with somebody, how does that really impact us in a way that might influence our decisions that we make, the friends that we have, etc., etc. More on that, it's kind of how we think about, influence, and relate to one another. So like I just said before, it really comes down to how our interactions kind of affect us on a day-to-day basis, or if it's really impactful, how does that really affect our personality, the way we think, and just some of the opportunities that we may have later down the line. Okay, so let's talk about altruism now, which is kind of the main thing that this presentation's about. So altruism is the unselfish regard for the welfare of others. So when you just go out of your way to help somebody, not really wanting anything in return, just being unconditionally generous towards another person. And honestly, this started to become a big topic of debate after the Kitty Genovese case. So let's write that down. Oops. And then, so we can get into that a little bit. Basically what happened is she was outside of her apartment, and she was attacked by a stalker, and she was yelling out for help, and all of her neighbors heard her. It was around 30, upwards of 40 neighbors all heard her scream, and nobody really did anything. And that's kind of concerning, because you would think someone crying out for help, they would do something about it. But they only called the cops 20 minutes after the fact, after the initial cry for help, because they were calling for a noise complaint, not even that somebody was being attacked, but for a noise complaint. So we can get into that a little more. But like, when we talk about this, why does nobody help in that situation? So it turns out that in order for somebody to help somebody else, that person has to go through a series of criteria in order for that person to help. So let's just write that down real quick. Intervention. Alright, so the first step is that you need to notice somebody in need of help. So you see the person, and then the second step is you need to interpret that as an emergency. So what that means is someone's having a seizure, is passed out, something like that. They need your assistance, and you feel that you have a connection with that person in some way. You're similar to that person. Number 3 is assume responsibility for that person. And I started that because we can talk about that in just a second. And number 4 is the attempt to help. So once all three of these steps are acknowledged and accepted by the person, you have a better chance of helping somebody else. And the reason why I started number 3 is because that's where people fail to help the person, or that's where it mostly stops, because we don't assume responsibility for the other person. And we'll talk about that later in the slides. And because there's a lot of criteria that needs to be met in order for you to assume responsibility. So there's some criteria for somebody to help somebody else, and this will increase the odds of somebody helping that said person. So the first one is if that person needs or is deserving of your help. So if you determine that that person needs help, or if he deserves your help, he or she deserves the help. So say it's like a high political figure, you're more likely to help that person. Or if that person is famous, or you know that person as a friend, that may be a criteria in which you would help that person. The next one is similar to us. So if the person in need is similar to you, same ethnicity, looks like you, if you know that person, if you have a relationship with that person in any way, that could be a factor. And the next one's pretty interesting. It's if we observe someone else being helped. So earlier in the day, you saw somebody helping somebody else, you were more inclined to help somebody. And that kind of goes back to the first one of priming. So you're primed to help somebody else. If you're not in a hurry, so if you're really late to a work meeting, you're most likely not going to help that person. Or if you feel guilty, if you feel guilty in any way for anything, maybe it's unrelated. It could be most likely unrelated to this instance of you helping somebody else. But if you feel guilty in any way, because that need for redemption is always there, and then that little factor we'll talk about in the next part here. So there's this thing called the social exchange theory, and it basically says that all humans have underlying self-interest, and that affects everything that we do. Every interaction we have, we always want to kind of do things for ourselves, which means max rewards. We want to get the maximum rewards with the least amount of costs. And then there's also these two things called the reciprocity norm. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong. But basically that is a norm in social psychology, in the social exchange theory, that basically says if we are helped, then we're going to give back that help. Let's just write that down. So if you're helped, you're going to give help. You're not going to harm anybody. You're more inclined to help somebody else if you're helped. And we see that in a lot of cases with people who kind of grew up in a lower income family that received a lot of help from others, and they end up giving back and helping the people that they're and they're kind of helping people that are similar to them. Their situation is the same. So again, we see those themes from the other slides before. And the next is the social responsibility norm. So that basically says we help those who need it, no matter what the cost. So let's write that down. So we're going to help no matter what the costs. And we can see that in helping infants, helping elderly people, because they, no matter what the cost, we're always going to be looking out for our youth, and we're always going to be looking out for our seniors. And there's also a study where people who attend religious events, so church, things like that, they're more inclined to give a lot more than they receive. So in church, for example, if they're shown to give upwards to 3 times more than other people. So that's just something interesting to think about as well. So with that said, that kind of wraps it up for this one. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you in the next one.